Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm joined today by Amber Brown and Hayley Steinmuller, who are survivors of the Las Vegas shooting that happened in 2017. Thanks for your time, Amber and Hayley. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into the topic itself, I would like to ask you, how did you get involved in the shooting? Meaning, were you attending the concert? Were you concert goers on that day? What happened? How did it start?
I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I had been going to concerts my entire life. It was probably my 60th or 70th one, and my first festival, and I was going with 3 other girls, and yeah, just ended up there at the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, I went for my 40th birthday with my friend, childhood friend. We went specifically to see one artist, Eric Church. He played the first night. But yes, I've also attended many festivals and many concerts my entire life.
This means that this is something that can happen to anyone, because I also go to concerts a lot, for instance, right? So
Yeah.
This is something that we should always keep in mind. When did you guys understand you were in the middle of a shooting?
For me, it was pretty early on. I heard the first bullets ring out, and somebody behind me said it was gunfire by the second round of gunshots, and so I ran at that point.
Yeah, for me, the first pops went off, and my friend I was with looked at me and she's like, "That's not effing funny," because we thought it was fireworks. And then the person on the right of me, our friend Dana, who was killed, said, "I just got shot, get down." And that's when we knew.
Well, it lasted 11 minutes. What do you recall? What happened in those 11 minutes? Because I saw on TV a lot of different things, like people running for their lives, but also people helping other people. And I also assume total chaos. How would you describe those crazy moments?
Total chaos is a great way to describe it. My brain naturally blocks out trauma, so I don't remember seeing or hearing or smelling or tasting the way a lot of survivors do. The run, I do remember running and my friend being 2 steps behind me, and she was shot. And I ended up running adjacently, so kind of diagonally to the venue, and I hid under a table, and there was a girl who had been shot in the leg. So I helped her and flipped a table and shoved it over us, and we could feel like the ricocheting of the bullets to the table. And it was a lot of chaos. Like, there were 2 people who were shot next to us who were under the table, and 2 other girls who were just cowering in the corner. And I got under the table and I texted my friend Melissa and I'm like, "Where are you?" And she's like, "I got shot. I'm fine." And I'm like, "I'm sorry, what?" And she's like, "I'm on the way to the hospital, but I was shot." And I'm like, "Oh, great. Okay." So it was a whole lot of confusion. Like, it was surreal. You didn't really feel, I personally didn't feel like I was in my own body. I felt like I was above it, looking down and seeing everything happen, but it didn't register that it was happening to me, and that my friends and my cousins I was with my cousins too. And they all were they were in the venue. We were in the area called the kill zone. So like 15 of the 58 that were killed were right where we were standing. But it was just absolute chaos. Like, we heard helicopters and thought there were people shooting from above. We were running and thought people were chasing us. Like, you didn't know where anything was coming from.
Yeah, and for me, I mean, pretty similar, is complete chaos. I was able to get out of the venue and get into a hotel and kind of get to what I thought was safety. But then, of course, people were running, people were getting shot as they were running. People were carrying other people the whole time. It definitely felt like I was outside, like above me, looking down on myself. Everything felt like it was slow motion, like they described in the movies. It seemed eerily quiet at times as I was running. And then, yeah, just utter chaos, and continued for long after that. People were saying ISIS was there. People were saying that they were chasing us, and so yeah, just absolute distraught.
Until we really knew details, there were definitely there was definitely a common consensus that there was more than one shooter. We only learned later that it was one person.
Okay, that's very interesting because I recall hearing that on the news too. So we all know that there's police at every concert, but this time the police had to face something that was totally unexpected and probably much bigger than anything they could imagine. How did they react? What can you guys tell us about the police?
From my experience, I mean, they burst down one of the fences that was not a typical exit. And so as we ran out the exit, I just remember a cop standing there with a huge gun and saying, like, run for your fucking lives. And at the time I thought he was really upset and angry. Obviously, you know, looking back, I just realized he was scared too. But I remember hiding behind the cop car and him just telling everybody, like, keep going, you can't stay here, run, 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 and just screaming at people. And that was my, like, you know, first experience with it.
We really we didn't have any police interaction where we hid or ran until the next day when they gave us the all clear. But leaving the place where we were sheltering in place, there was obviously tons and tons of police presence, and it was almost like a ghost town. Like, it was so eerily quiet. All you saw was flashing lights and just crap everywhere on the streets, like boots and hats and people's clothes and just blood. And it was very eerie. It was like walking through a war zone, and just police presence everywhere. But we didn't really have any interaction with any of the police until they said, you can leave this room. We had like 17 people huddled in a room. And that was really the only interaction we had.
And how did you guys find shelter? Because I assume you started running for your life right after you understood that there was a shooting. How did you guys find shelter?
So we ended up running to the vestibule of a church. So it was kind of like an archway of a church. And there were 7 of us kind of huddled in this like archway. Complete strangers trying to like use each other's cell phones to call loved ones and make sure they knew we were okay. And then when the shooting, we were in the venue for the entire time. So I sheltered underneath a table first, and then the vestibule of a church. And then when we realized the shooting was completely over, we ran to a timeshare across the street. And there were a bunch of other survivors because there were 20,000 people in that venue. So we just ran to where somebody else was staying. They ended up being from Colorado, which was kind of ironic because I was there with people from California. So we ran into that area, and people were just shoving us in. They're like, come in, come in, come in, come in, come in. And then they barricaded the room, and they were like stealing cushions from the pool area so people could sleep. And we slept in the kitchen next to like a stove and a refrigerator. But that's how we found shelter, was somebody was just like shoving us into a room. They were just like basically still chaotic, just shoving us into whatever was open. But there were people sleeping in the lobby. There were people just barricaded kind of everywhere. My cousin stayed at Tropicana, and they actually stayed in the basement by the kitchen. So they ended up getting shoveled into like almost like a tornado shelter by the kitchen. So it was just kind of whoever grabbed you and pulled you into a room at that point.
Yeah, mine was pretty similar actually. I ended up running, and I called my mom as I was running to let her know what was happening. We couldn't figure out. I was alone at the time. I got separated from the friends that I was with, and so I just at that point was on my own, and made it into one of the hotels nearby. It wasn't my hotel, but I remember as I was running, people were passing other buildings and breaking windows, and I was still like, we're overreacting. It's not a mass shooting. Like, we're going to get in trouble if we break windows. And so I ended up finding a hotel like a mile down the road. I ran the mile in 5 minutes and got into the hotel. And at first I was telling everybody, like, I was one of the first ones in there. And so I was telling them what was going on. I think people just thought I was drunk and, you know, like spiraling, but nobody was listening to me. And so I ran into the kitchen of the hotel also, hid for a little bit until more people started coming in there. When we started hearing the rumors that, you know, shooters were in the hotels, I ran into an industrial freezer and hid in there for an hour. With some off-duty cops and EMTs and just other concert goers that happened to be, you know, first responders. And so then they were bringing people who were shot into the freezer to get help. And then after a while just kind of ended up in the main lobby of the hotel. They wouldn't let us leave. They wouldn't let us go get a room there. So I just sat on the floor of a hotel with strangers and, you know, trying to find everybody's loved ones.
Well, and when did you guys understand it was over?
Probably the next morning when I left the Vegas and drove home. I was in the hotel from 10 o'clock until 6 a.m. or like 10:30 until 6 a.m. And they wouldn't let us leave. And, you know, I feel like even at 6 a.m. walking, you know, like she said, walking on the strip with not a single person besides policemen and, you know, people's leftover belongings on the floor was, you know, very eerie. I got back to my hotel, packed up our stuff, and left from there. I feel like that's when I actually felt like it was over.
Yeah, I didn't feel it was over until the friend that I was with was released from the hospital and came back to the room. So we were told around 5 a.m. that we could leave where we were sheltering, and we walked across like the Excalibur Bridge on the strip. And again, it was extremely eerie because
That's where we were staying. So
if you've ever been to Vegas, there's never nobody on the street. And there was nobody on the street. And still, even then, I did not feel safe. Like I did not feel like it was over until I saw my friend who was shot, and knew that she was okay and alive. And then we did the same thing. We packed up our bags. She went with her husband and drove home. And then I got on my plane back to Denver. And I just still was in shock. I don't think I really believed it was over until I got home. And I knew that I was home and that the incident was completely over.
Well, that day, of course, changed the course of your lives. And how were the following days right after the events? What were your thoughts in those days?
For me, I kind of went right back into work and just continued, you know, my daily stuff. I went to work the very next day. Some friends came over immediately and hung out. I went and met up because I never saw the 3 girls that I went with. I didn't see them again until we all got back home. So we got back home, kind of hung out that day. I went to work the very next day. I went to a concert like 3 or 4 days later by myself in Los Angeles. So I just tried to get back, you know, into my routine. And I know that's different for everybody, but that was like what I needed at the time. And it helped to be around, you know, people that were able to, like, already knew me before and were able to support.
I was pretty similar. I came home, and immediately went back to work and kind of threw myself into it. I did kind of numb everything out for a while. So I drank a little bit too much and didn't really get help right away. I didn't get therapy right away. So I felt like I still felt so detached from the incident. Like I didn't feel like it happened to me. But it was, and I went to another state where I really didn't know anybody. I didn't go with people from my state. And it was very shortly after that I ended up getting contacted by a group that was a lot of survivors, like 200 survivors from Colorado. And so I spent a lot of time with them in the moments after. So they set up meetings with an organization called the Rebels Project, which I still sit on the board with. And they had some therapy sessions and some first responder sessions, and they did like grounding techniques. So that was really what kind of helped me through, because I didn't have anybody nearby that was with me before. Nobody knew me before the incident that was close enough to me to where I could have that support system the way Hayley did.
And what happened in the following weeks or even months? Because I guess you guys had to like piece your life back together.
Yeah. Yeah. The following weeks and months, it was a lot of, for me, I couldn't really remember. Like it frustrated me that I couldn't remember anything because that's not where my brain goes. Like when I have a traumatic experience, my brain shuts off completely and kind of protects me from it. So I had to really rely on others to piece together what had happened. And for me, that made me very angry. So I went through a real anger stage. But I just tried to kind of function through, I guess. until about a year after I finally got some real help. So it took me a good year to really come to terms with the fact that this had happened to me and around me and to the people that I loved.
Yeah, and I feel like for me, it was almost the complete opposite. I was in grad school to be a school counselor at the time, and so I immediately went back and I had, a bunch of therapists and counselors as professors, and so they were very supportive. They asked a lot of questions. I ended up telling my entire story to a couple of my classes within like 2 or 3 days of it happening. So I feel like I've been talking about it nonstop. I wrote down every single thing that happened because, I feel like if I wait too long, I would forget details or I would kind of start to dissociate. So I wrote like a very, very detailed description of everything that happened, just for myself. And, I've been telling the same story ever since. I, what was I saying? Brain fog. But yeah, I just feel like I've been telling the story. And so to me, it almost made me feel like later on it didn't happen to me because I told the same story so many times and kind of eventually disassociated from that. I didn't look at the pictures. I didn't unpack my suitcase for a couple weeks after it. But once I did, I feel like it really set in then too.
Are you guys still in touch with other people who were at the concert with you? I guess so, of course. Do you ever speak with them about what happened?
So obviously Hayley and I still talk. And we did not know each other before this incident. We didn't even know each other until I think the second anniversary, is when we met. Other than that, I rarely talk to the person that I went to the concert with. My cousin completely, we don't talk about it. And I don't see her very often. I found that unfortunately, a lot of my values don't align with the group that was with us at that shooting. So I would say by and large, no, I do not associate with people.
Yeah, and so I went with one girl and then two of her friends. I talked to the girl that I went with, not so much about the shooting. We connect every anniversary and we still have a friendship. She's back in California, so when I go home I see her, but other than that, the other two girls I don't talk much to. One of them I'm okay with, and the other one said some pretty vile stuff in some of the survivor groups, so don't align with her values.
Okay. Do you know how they cope with the tragedy? Other people who were with you? Maybe you don't, if you don't talk about it.
Well, we belong to a couple of organizations that have helped a lot of people through similar traumas, and it's very fascinating because no path looks the same. Everyone remembers differently, everyone processes differently, and everyone heals differently. So the way that I heal is through sharing my story and helping other people through it, and really bringing awareness around acceptance of, for me, what I consider to be an invisible disability. And some people shut down completely and they don't want to talk about it ever again. Some people really lean into their faith or, something that brings them, in my opinion, a little bit of a false sense of security. But every single journey is different. And we are big proponents of we don't trauma compare. So we don't compare how people heal. We don't put any judgment on how anyone heals. Yeah. Do you have anything to add?
Nope, that was great.
How does the Las Vegas shooting affect your life even today, if it does?
For me, it's more so with the triggers. So I work in a school that actually had a school shooting as well before I was ever there. So it's the little things of they have fire drills and they let me know because otherwise that could be a huge trigger for me. Obviously the typical like knowing your exits and being hyper aware of people around you. So for me, it's more so the triggers than anything.
Yeah, same. It's a lot about the triggers, but I feel like I am more in tune now when people are struggling with something. Like I feel like I can kind of pick up on people who have some sort of mental health crisis or are feeling triggered in some way. I can kind of identify it better. Whereas before, I didn't have any idea of how impactful mental illness could be. And I was honestly a little bit judgmental. I was pretty close minded around it being something that they could control instead of something that controlled them. So I'm very different now. I'm very, very aware that mental health is something that you can't control. It's something that you have to manage through and really get help for.
Absolutely. And you guys are also part of an organization called Survivor's Path, in that sharing and understanding how to overcome this kind of trauma. How does that help you heal the wound?
Yeah, for me, I mean, Amber said it too. For us, I feel like talking about it does help us particularly. And so being able to share our story and help others, you know, it helps heal me, because I feel like there's almost a reason for why it happened. Like I'm able to take that and, you know, make something out of it and not just have it be something I went through.
Yeah, I like to say it's turning your mess into a message. So it's basically being able to take something that was really super tragic and terrible, and to allow others to see, like, not only can you get through something, but you can help others through something that's similar. And so I think sharing my story, and I really concentrate on like understanding and helping people through trauma in the workplace, like understanding that PTSD is completely real in many different ways. It's not necessarily this kind of an incident. It could be domestic violence. It could be the death of a child. It could be anything that's really super traumatic, but the symptoms are very similar. So for me, it's really being able to shed some light into the fact that 70% of us are going to experience trauma, and we need to be very understanding and really accept people who have experienced it.
Well, do you think the laws that allow people in the United States to have access to firearms so easily should be changed?
Oh, you asking two girls who went to a country concert. No, I will speak for me that I've never liked guns. They've always really scared me, and I grew up near LA, so gun violence was just kind of a way of life. Like it was all around me. But I believe in common sense laws. I don't necessarily, I don't care if you have a gun as long as you're a responsible gun owner. I'm more triggered by the fact that people hold so tightly to their beliefs that that is a right, that everyone should be able to possess something that could kill someone else. And I don't think that anything automatic should be in the hands of a civilian, period.
Yeah. I mean, echoing that exactly. And, you know, just, yeah, definitely adding more background checks and longer wait times and all of that to get, if people do want guns, it into the hands of people that are going to be safe and responsible with them.
Well, see, you also have a very interesting point of view about this too, even if you were just concert goers, as you just said. Well, many thanks for your time and for giving us your insight about this event. That is always, at least often forgotten. People don't talk about it anymore because, I don't know, it wasn't as widespread as 9/11 or the Orlando shooting. I don't know why. Nobody talks about it anymore. So I'm very happy.
There was a lot of money paid so that they wouldn't.
Sorry, say it again.
There was a lot of money paid so that they wouldn't.
Ah, okay, I understand. That's okay. That's a very interesting point of view too.
Yeah.
Many thanks again for your time and for your very precious explanations. Thanks everybody for watching this, and see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye, thank you.